I call this meeting to order. Welcome to number, I'll recognize you just as I finish, Ms. O'Connell. I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 135 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. I'd like to remind participants of the following points. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. All comments should be addressed through the chair. Members, please raise your hand if you wish to speak, whether participating in person or via Zoom. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can. Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move that we resume debate of my motion of December 5th in relation to the study of Indian interference.
The motion is moved. Ms. O'Connell, do you want to speak to it?
Yes, please. Sorry, thank you, Chair. This is just in continuation of where we left off on Thursday. I had, based on the testimony provided by Mayor Patrick Brown, he indicated that MP Rempel Garner had, in fact, received a phone call from the Indian Consul General. An angry phone call is what he described. From there, she had a 45-minute debrief with two of his campaign staff, Mr. Jaskaran Sandhu and Mr. Harkiat Singh. And so my motion from Thursday, we were debating the invitation of inviting Ms. Michelle Rempel Garner to testify at this committee, Mr. Jaskaran Sandhu and Mr. Harkiat Singh. And so that is the motion before us, and I think it's very clear based on the testimony why it's important to speak to them. So given the fact that we have a scheduled on the agenda for later to complete the auto theft study, I don't want to belabor this point. It's where we left off last week, and just given that everyone wanted to adjourn the meeting at our 6 o'clock hour, I think it's just only fair to deal with this off the top and then be able to move with the rest of the agenda. So I'll leave it there, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. I see that the email is being sent with the motion, but in the meanwhile, I recognize Mr. Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe we have 2 meetings left on the India study. And
so we actually never set, it was sort of like a minimum of this many meetings, and we can always add meetings. So we haven't spoken on that either yet. Exactly.
Can I ask a point of clarification without losing my, I'm presumed that all the parties or some of the parties have submitted witnesses for this study. Can you?
For the India foreign interference study? Yes.
And so I'm just wondering, like, why can't these people in this motion, like, why do we need a motion for this? We can just submit these people as witnesses. If the Liberal Party wants to submit this as witnesses, then we'll have an opportunity to have them come as witnesses.
Yep, Ms. O'Connell?
Because the deadline to submit witnesses passed, and this was based on the testimony, and it's a motion before us that is in order, and if there's no objection to it, then we should vote and move on to the rest of the agenda.
So what I'm being told by the clerk is that it's flexible, that it was a deadline, but that was more sort of just encourage folks to submit witnesses so that we can have more folks testify. So, you know, the motion is on the floor, but I understand your point, Mr. Lloyd. They could be just invited.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we're just reviewing this, and so these two folks, Mr. Sandhu and Mr. Singh, were mentioned by Mr. Brown. I'm just not clear why we would be, like, I assume just based on Liberal patterns, is they're going to ask them to come and then force them to come. And it just seems to be that that's how we've proceeded. And it's just odd because we started this study with a very serious matter that it's alleged that the Indian government was involved in the murder and possible additional attempted murders or other extortion efforts and things like that, very serious matters. And now it seems that this study has turned into some sort of hunt for anyone who knows Mr. Patrick Brown. And it just seems that it's really devaluing the core focus of this study that was really to review the impact and the causes and the potential solutions for the fact that a foreign government is allegedly involved in murders of Canadian citizens on Canadian soil. This does seem like a very far departure of that, and I don't see how this would serve the overall purpose of looking to prevent future murders in this country from foreign governments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Sancho. So I think the end result is the same, whether we pass it through a motion or just have the clerk invite the witnesses, because one of the witnesses we can't force her to appear, and the other two witnesses we haven't even seen if they're willing to come or not. So I'm just wondering if there's consensus in the committee to just invite, or do we stick with the motion?
With the motion.
We're sticking with the motion, Ms. Sancho.
I move to adjourn debate on this. I suppose let me just get past this already.
So a motion has been brought forward. We have to proceed to a vote.
Doesn't have to be recorded.
Oh, it doesn't have to be recorded, but is there will to?
Just a clarification, then we don't get to vote on the substance of this motion.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. So I will ask for a recorded vote.
Ms. O'Connell,
No. No.
Ms. Zaid,
No.
Ms. Hefner,
No.
Ms. Damoff,
No.
Mr. McDonald,
No.
Ms. Denshaw,
Yes.
Mr. Lloyd,
In favor?
Mr. Motz,
Yes.
Mr. Dondal,
In favor.
Madame Michaud,
Contre.
Mr. McGregor. No. So, yeas pour 4, 4, nays contre 7.
So the nays have it. The motion remains on the floor. If there's no more hands, maybe we proceed to a vote on the motion to resume debate.
And I'll ask for a recorded vote.
A recorded vote.
Ms. O'Connell,
Yes. Yes.
Ms. Zaid,
Yes.
Ms. Hefner,
En faveur.
Ms. Damoff,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Ms. Denshaw,
No.
Mr. Lloyd, no. Mr. Motz,
No.
Mr. Dondal, Madame Michaud,
En faveur.
Mr. McGregor. So, yeas pour 7, nays contre 4, 4.
So the motion, we're resuming debate on the motion. I see Ms. O'Connell's hands up.
Sorry, the motion passed, correct?
Sorry, did the motion pass?
The motion has passed.
Oh, the motion has passed itself.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, sorry. I was one step behind.
So
Chair?
right now, we are on the debate of the motion. The motion to resume debate has
Exactly.
passed.
Sorry, just to clarify, there was a motion to adjourn debate that failed. Therefore, we go back to the motion, which we just voted on, and it carried. That's fine.
So no, so sorry, my initial intuition I think was correct, which was we voted down Ms. Dancho's motion, and then we voted in favor of the motion to resume debate. So, you know.
On the motion, I'll ask for a recorded vote.
So we are discussing the actual motion itself
Individual,
to summon the three witnesses.
or not summon, sorry.
Sorry, invite.
Invite them.
To invite them.
Rappel au règlement, Monsieur le Président.
On point of order, Chair.
All right, well, there's a
J'étais certaine qu'on venait de...
I think that we were just voting to pass the motion, and since we dealt with Madame Dancho's motion, we have remained in the debate of the motion. So there's absolutely no reason why we should vote to see whether or not we should resume a debate. We can just resume debate on the motion. I just want to be sure that I'm understanding this.
Very careful on the procedure of this. Very quickly. So a motion was brought forward to resume debate by Ms. O'Connell. A motion to adjourn the debate was brought forward by Ms. Dancho. We voted on that motion first, so we dismissed the motion to adjourn, so that we were still on the motion to resume debate, which we just voted in favor of. So now we have resumed debate on that motion, which is just invite those 3 witnesses, and now we are on the substance of that motion. So we need one more vote to actually Ms. Zahid's.
No, just for clarification, so we were having a debate on Ms. O'Connell's motion. We were having a debate, and after that, there was a motion to adjourn that debate.
Exactly.
So we voted against that. Okay, so that doesn't imply that we are back on the debate happening on that motion?
No, because no, I think the initial motion was to adjourn to resume debate. So now we are back. So we passed that motion to resume debate. So now we're on the substance of that motion. Procedurally, that's where we're at. That's what my instinct told me, and the clerk has also indicated. Right?
Originally, the motion was December 5th.
That's fine. I'll ask for a recorded vote on the motion.
A recorded vote on the motion. I've already called for a vote. I'm sorry,
Vote when there's people on the point of order, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Lloyd.
You can't call for a recorded vote when there are still people on the speaking list.
So, Mr. Lloyd, I hear you, but right, 3 seconds ago, your side was under the impression that the motion had actually, in substance, passed.
That doesn't matter, Mr. Chair.
You can challenge the chair if you want, but I've called for the vote.
Well, I mean, okay, so before I challenge the chair,
Okay.
I will just say that this is a bad precedent that basically means that the chair can unilaterally say, if somebody says, I want a recorded vote, then you can cut off parliamentarians' ability to speak when they're on the speaking list. And that actually goes against the fundamental rules of Parliament.
I hear you,
that
Mr.
if there is a member that wants to speak, that they have the right to speak. And when the speaker's list is exhausted, only at that time can there be a recorded vote. This is a fundamental right of parliamentarians. And my name was on the speaking list. I waved at you several times. You weren't paying attention. And I made it known to you at the soonest availability that I was ready to speak. Madame O'Connell said, I want a recorded vote, but she was still speaking at the time. And so she was speaking. A member cannot just call for a recorded vote and cut off debate. That is just an absurd, a gross violation of our rights as parliamentarians.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. So I genuinely did not see your hand up. And again, I was under the impression that a few seconds ago your side was okay with the entire motion passing. So I assumed that, and you guys are shaking your head, so I assume, sorry about that. And I assumed that you guys are okay with it. And so I didn't see any hands, so I thought we'd move on to the vote.
This is a violation of the standing orders, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Pearson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just arriving here, it does seem that there's a lot of confusion as to which motion we are on. So can you just restate what motion we are debating right now, and then I'll decide whether I need to be on the speaking list or not.
So it's been emailed, I think, and that in relation to its study on Indian interference, the committee invite the following witnesses: the
Point
Honourable
of
Michelle
order.
Rampal-Gardner, Mr. Jarskaran Sandhu, Mr. Harkirat Singh.
Point of order.
There's been a point of order raised, Mr. O'Connell.
Thank you, Chair. Can you just clarify, was there actually anyone on your speaking list? Because despite Mr. Lloyd, in his mind, wanting to, if he doesn't indicate to the chair, that's not actually a speaking list or a speaking order. If they don't indicate to you, you have no obligation to then ask. I didn't think, I even said earlier, if there's no one else on the list, nobody put their hands up. I suggested you call the vote if there's no one else on the list and no one put their hands up. So if the Conservatives are now disappointed that their mental telepathy didn't go through and that they didn't indicate to the chair actually to be on the speaking order, they can challenge you. But I even said it on the record. If there's no one else on the list, you can call the vote.
So, Mr. Lloyd, again, you can challenge me, but sure.
Mr. Chair, I move that the privileges of members of this committee were violated when the chair proceeded to vote before elapsing the speakers list. That is a challenge of the chair.
You just challenged the chair. That's the motion.
You violated our privileges.
Okay, we're going to.
Okay.
You can raise it in the House. You can't raise it in committee as a challenge. So, and there's a motion on the floor, which is dilatory, which is a challenge of the chair. So there's no actual debate on it. Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Point of order. Mr. Connell.
Mr. Lloyd, he is now trying to reframe it. I said, is this a challenge to the chair? And he said, that's what I'm doing. I'm challenging the chair. And now they're trying to say it's a different motion. There was a challenge to the chair, which is a dilatory motion, and we vote on it. If Mr. Lloyd wants to change that now, it's too late. I even called him on it, and he doubled down saying it was a challenge to the chair.
I just need a second. We're going to suspend for a little while. because there's a bit of confusion on the floor, and Mr. Lloyd, I don't know if you properly moved that motion or not, and there's a bit of back and forth. I've been fair to you guys. I did not see your hand raised. I will bring it back to the point where you can discuss the motion. I think that's where we'll go. Because I think then we can at least talk about the committee business and move forward with that. So we're going to go back. So right now we are at the actual substance of the motion. And Mr. Lloyd, I recognize you. Again, because there's a bit of confusion here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do appreciate you being fair on this, because I believe it would have been a violation of my privilege if we had carried forward with a recorded vote while there were still, in my opinion, members on the speaking list. And I'll just, before I get to the substance of the motion, I just want to, relate Standing Order 116, which 2A, unless a time limit has been adopted by the committee
Point
or
of
by
order.
the House.
Ms. O'Connell, on a point of order.
Chair, you've ruled that Mr. Lloyd can have his time back, so I would suggest he speak to the motion at hand.
It's not a point of
Mr.
order.
Lloyd,
anyways.
I can't
It
tell you
is,
what to
it's
say or
relevant.
not, but maybe you can speak to me after about the rules. I just read the rules very recently. Maybe we just move on to the substance of the motion itself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do appreciate that. And I believe this is part of the substance of the motion because we dealt with it. But I'll dispose of this very quickly. So, quote, unless a time limit has
Point
been
of order.
adopted by the committee or by the House.
So, Mr. Lloyd, 1 second. We're speaking about the substance of the motion to invite witnesses. This is related to that?
Yes.
Okay. I did hear a point of order from Ms. O'Connell.
My point of order is relevance. You've already ruled on this, so he can't speak to it. He needs to speak to the motion, which is on inviting witnesses.
Sure, Ms. Dancho.
Or anything. So we're debating his motion.
No,
You said that we can debate the motion now.
no, we're debating
The substance of the motion.
the substance of the motion. Exactly.
Oh, Ms. O'Connell's motion.
Exactly.
Oh, I see. Okay, there's so many motions flying around, Mr.
Yep.
Chair. So we're back to the liberal.
So, Mr. Lloyd, please be judicious
Motion.
with your language. We're back to the motion. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I will say, it was my experience in this committee that members are given a wide latitude to get to the point, and I can assure you that I'm going to be very brief with the point I'm about to make, and we can continue on with doing this debate. Standing Order 116
Point of order.
says, hey, thank you for.
Point of order, Ms. O'Connell.
Relevance, Mr. Chair. It's interesting that the Conservatives don't want to speak about inviting Michelle Rempel-Garner and two witnesses that had a debrief. So my point of order is relevance. If he can't speak to the main motion, he should allow us to vote on it.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. I've also made the same point to Mr. Lloyd.
Thank you. So, 2A, unless a time limit has been adopted by the committee or by the House,
Chair,
the chair of a
he's-
standing, special,
Point
or
of order.
legislative committee.
Chair, he's directly violating your ruling. He made a
realize he
big
could
fuss
rule
about his privilege to speak
what
on the
I'm allowed to
motion,
say
and
or
now
not
he's
say.
not speaking on the motion. He made this fuss to be able to debate the motion, and he's refusing to debate the motion. I'd ask for relevance.
I do agree
And
with
if he
Ms.
can't get
O'Connell's
to it, then we should move to
Point
the
of
next
order, Mr.
speaker.
Chair.
Point of order.
I'm not clear which standing order Mr. Lloyd is violating. Perhaps Ms. O'Connell
Relevance,
can
you
be.
have to speak to the motion. Relevance.
Sorry, which
Haven't even
number
been
is
given
that?
a chance to speak to the motion. Get getting cut off. I keep getting cut off.
Mr. Lloyd. Mr. Lloyd.
Point of order. Just kind of curious. I'm usually not on this committee, and it's been rather confusing since I've been here. I'm just wondering if I could hear what the motion actually is again.
It's been emailed.
I'll read it, Chair.
It's been emailed. It's been shared in everyone's inbox.
I'll happily read it so that the Conservatives know what they're filibustering.
I can read it, Ms. O'Connell.
Thank
So
you.
That in relation to its study of Indian interference, the committee invite the following witnesses: the Honourable Michelle Rempel-Garner, Mr. Jaskaran Sandhu, Mr. Harkirat Singh. That's it. Mr. Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you know what? It's always been my experience in this committee that members are given a latitude to get to the point. It's the same thing in the House. And if Ms. O'Connell wants to keep cutting me off before I can make my point, then we can have a very long committee meeting today, or we can just get through what I'm about to say and move on in this discussion. Standing Order 116 says, 2A, unless a time limit has been adopted by the committee or by the House, the chair of a standing, special, or legislative committee may not bring a debate to an end while there are members present who still wish to participate. And further, B, a violation of paragraph A of this section may be brought to the attention of the speaker by
Point
any
of order.
member. I was almost done.
Ms. O'Connell.
Chair, he is trying to relitigate a ruling you already ruled on. In fact, the whole issue was him wanting to speak to this motion, and now he's refusing to speak to it. So if the Conservatives would like to justify why they don't want these three members to come, then that's fine. But I would like the relevance, and it's very disrespectful in your ruling, Mr. Chair, that you gave him the opportunity to speak on the main motion, and now he's not doing it.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. Mr. Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just take a little step back. B, a violation of paragraph A of this section may be brought to the attention of the Speaker by any member, and the Speaker shall have the power to rule on the matter. If, in the opinion of the Speaker, such a violation has occurred, the Speaker may order that all subsequent proceedings in relation to the said violation be nullified. Now, this committee study that we've been having on the issue of Indian foreign interference is important, and I want to continue on with this study, but I just think it's important because there was so much confusion in this committee over your initial ruling, and I do appreciate the fairness that you brought when you changed that, is that actually if we had gone forward with a recorded vote on this motion while there were still members, and I take you at your word that you didn't see or didn't claim to see, Mr. Chair.
Lloyd, I've already ruled on this. Please move to the substance of the motion.
I've been talking about India. Thank you, Do you recognize me, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Thank you. So I've been talking about the motion. I talked about the fact that we almost had a recorded vote on the motion. This is clearly on the substance of the motion. The fact that we almost had a recorded debate so that members couldn't have a debate on this. I appreciate the fact that you have, rescinded your initial ruling that you said you didn't see anyone on the speakers list, and I do appreciate the fairness with which you have conducted this committee. You can get quite bumpy at times, Mr. Chair, but I do appreciate that you took a step back there and that you've let members have the opportunity to speak.
It's for Ms. Dancho. She wanted to know the standing order. It's 11-2 in regards to order and decorum and the repetitive questioning. Chair, at some point, you'd have to rule for the member to either get to the relevance of the motion, which they are avoiding speaking about because they don't want to invite these three witnesses, a Conservative colleague of theirs, they're filibustering. If he has nothing relevant to say to move to the motion, then I would suggest you move to the next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Floor for a debate.
Relevance is point of order.
Well, you've said it like 5 times.
Oh, well then get to it.
Mr. Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was just extolling your virtues to this committee, Mr. Chair. I just want to say I do appreciate you changing your ruling because the fact is that we couldn't have actually any debates or any actions that we took after a privilege motion, if the Speaker of the House had indeed ruled that my privileges were violated, which I believe they would have been if you had continued, would have nullified the important work of this committee that took place afterwards. So it was really for the sake of this committee that I just clarify this very important standing order point so that we don't waste our time because, as I said, this is a very important issue. One thing that's very interesting is we've had all of these meetings and I feel like there's been a real lack of coordination. I've heard very interesting testimony. We've heard from members of the Sikh community who have raised very serious concerns about their safety in Canada. We have these allegations of electoral interference, and we brought Mayor Patrick Brown last week, who actually I think shed a lot of light on the fact that these allegations did not have any impact on the Conservative leadership race. And it just feels like at every one of these meetings, the Liberals, instead of wanting to talk about the broad issue, which is of deep concern to the Sikh community and to all Canadians, frankly, that a foreign government would interfere in any way in our country, especially in a criminal way, when we're seeing that Canadians are being killed allegedly by agents of a foreign state, that we seem to be going down this very narrow path. It's like the Liberals are like a rock climber and they found this very tiny little ledge that they can attach their fingers to, and we're going down this rabbit hole while ignoring this very broad issue of the concerns of the Sikh community over their safety. So to illustrate what this little toehold that, or I don't even think it is a toehold, is that allegedly my colleague, the Honourable Michelle Rempel-Garner, was working on the Patrick Brown leadership campaign, and I believe this was during 2022. And during that time, it was a very tumultuous time in Alberta. Jason Kenney was the premier at the time, and he went through a leadership review. He won 51% of the vote in that leadership review, but chose to step down. And that was a very tumultuous time. I know there was a lot of people in Alberta politics who were thinking about how they were going to fill that vacuum. And my colleague, Michelle Rempel-Garner, I'm proud to be a colleague with her, was thinking about throwing her hat in the ring to succeed Jason Kenney as the premier of Alberta. And because of that it's a very serious undertaking to run for the leadership, because it's not just that she would become the leader of the UCP party, but that the leader of the UCP party would automatically become the premier of Alberta. So you can imagine, Mr. Chair, how serious of an undertaking that would have been for my honourable colleague, Michelle Rempel-Garner, and the ability of her to do that while also co-chairing Mr. Brown, Mayor Brown's leadership campaign. I like to think I'm a hardworking member of this House, but to co-chair a federal leadership campaign while also running your own provincial leadership campaign, I don't think there's any person in this room who could credibly claim that they could do both of those things at the same time. And so it's very clear from Mayor Patrick Brown's testimony that we had last week, and the words of my colleague, the Honourable Michelle Rempel-Garner, that she ceased to work on the leadership campaign of Mayor Brown so that she could pursue. In the end, she did initially pursue it, but did not actually follow through with her run for Premier of Alberta. But I think that's a very credible, and that's frankly a true analysis. But we have the Liberals here who are trying to stake their claim on the idea that somehow the Consul General of India relayed to Michelle Rempel-Garner that they were unhappy about a terminology that Mayor Patrick Brown was using in his campaign. And that certainly, Mayor Brown certainly didn't think that crossed the threshold, although I did note that last week he said that if there was actual people being intimidated and not buying memberships to support him, that would cross the threshold. But none of that has actually really been, there's not been any evidence provided at this committee that happened. And so now we have the Liberals who are just proceeding with, every little sliver that they can get. We're getting a new meeting, and yet, and this is going to go on forever. And what we really need to do is take a step back at this committee, because we have a tremendous amount of work that we're doing. We still have Paul Bernardo, the study of the corrections, transferring the notorious killer Paul Bernardo to a medium security prison. That report has not been finalized yet. That's something we started over a year ago. We had the auto theft report, which we could have actually completed. We could have gotten to it now. Very, very importantly, we could have gotten to it, and yet we're dealing with this ridiculous motion to invite people when they could just invite them themselves. And so I just think that we're going down this road. We're overly politicizing this issue. And that's actually, I think Mayor Brown made a good point about this, is that he was even reticent to come to this committee, and that's why he was summoned by the Liberals, was because he felt that this Liberal government was politicizing this issue, and so he didn't want to come. But he did respect the will of the committee, and he did come. And so I think we don't need to go any further down this path. And I think we need to talk about the real substantive issues about, especially the alleged criminal activity that has taken place in Canada, the intimidation of members of the Sikh community in particular. I mean, we just saw it in the House last week. I don't know if you saw this, well, actually, you were there, Mr. Chair. I saw it in the House. One of your own members, after a unanimous consent motion was put in the House, another member of your party came into the House and said that he was threatened in the lobby, in the government lobby, by members of your caucus, Mr. Chair. So other members of the Liberal caucus are threatening other members of the Liberal team over this issue? And I just think that's highly concerning. I'm not sure if the member is going to be bringing forward a privilege motion in the House, but I can tell you that if any person in this House, and thankfully I've never had to endure this myself, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chair. I've had very collegial relations in my 7 years here in the House, but when I saw the member for Nepean come forward in the House and say that he had been threatened by members of his
Point
own
of order,
caucus.
Chair. Point of order.
Ms. Damoff?
To relevancy, we're debating a motion to have 3 witnesses come on to the committee, not about anything that's happened in the House. If we're going to go down that road, let's talk about how the Conservatives were intimidating the NDP during a vote. So can we stick to the motion about having 3
folks,
witnesses come?
Thank you, Ms. Damoff. Mr. Lloyd? Mr. Lloyd, again, I ask you to stay on point. We're discussing a motion to invite witnesses. I'm going to put this out there to the committee itself. Again, we can withdraw the motion and just invite the witnesses, which is what I said initially as well. Sure. If you guys are okay with that, we can just invite them. And we can move on, because I know, Madam Michaud is shaking her head, and I really do wish to get to the auto theft study. Again, we have a small sliver to be able to take it. Okay.
So with my remaining time, am I recognized, Mr. Chair?
So we're going to withdraw the motion. Is that okay?
Yes. But I need to relinquish the chair, the speaking position.
Point of order.
So,
Chair, you've offered up a solution.
And I want to accept your solution. I just want an opportunity to speak.
Mr. Lloyd.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that offer and take you at your word, and so I move that we adjourn debate. They can do whatever I can't.
Sure.
I can't move that on a dilatory motion. I can't add qualifiers. But
the motion can be withdrawn. It doesn't have to go into adjourn debate.
that's just the way I thought it would be done most cleanly. So
It can be withdrawn with unanimous consent. Do we have unanimous consent to withdraw this motion?
okay, do we have unanimous consent that we withdraw the motion?
I see thumbs up, so we're okay. We're going to withdraw that motion. I would really like to move on to the auto theft study. We will invite those witnesses. Thank you.
Chair, wait, I just want to be crystal clear. If we
Ms.
give
O'Connell.
unanimous consent that you'll be inviting these 3 witnesses.
We will definitely be inviting these 3 witnesses. Thank you.
Okay, then we're fine with that.
Okay. Can we, which one of, Mr. Dowdle, Mr. Veerson? Are you both at committee? Okay, I just wanted to be
I'm just
clear.
here on auto, interest of around the auto theft issue.
Okay, 'cause we're going to move into that now. So you're,
Super.
yeah, okay. So we, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on October 23rd, 2023, the committee is resuming its study of the growing problem of car thefts in Canada. We are returning to the review of the draft report. Does the committee wish to move in camera for this portion of our work?
Oh, never mind. Yes.
So we're going to suspend for 5 minutes to move in camera. Thank you. Thank you. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on September 19th, 2024, the committee resumes its study on Russian interference and disinformation campaigns in Canada. I'd like to now welcome our witnesses today, Rachel Gilmore, Ms. Gilmore, an independent journalist, Pierre Jolicoeur, Professor of Political Science and Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities at the Royal Military College of Canada. And lastly, we have Pekka Kalliomäki, and I apologize if I pronounced that wrong, sir, researcher, International Center for Defense and Security. Just for the sake of the committee, I know that Ms. Gilmore has a hard stop at 1:30, and I know that Mr. Kalliomäki, I understand it's very late for you, so we will try to wrap this committee up, but thank you so much for appearing. We'll start. Actually, now I give the floor to Ms. Gilmore for an opening statement of up to 5 minutes. Ms. Gilmore.
All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me. This is obviously a very important topic, and I have some big feelings about it. So to kick things off, I'm sure you all remember the Freedom Convoy, yeah? Well, as part of my coverage at the time, I joined several Telegram channels and groups where organizers and supporters gathered to exchange everything from planning details to fringe conspiracy theories. And you might not have realized this, but it was actually just days after the convoy, actually you guys probably do know this, just days after the convoy that Russia invaded Ukraine. So it was really interesting, an interesting time to be monitoring all of those Telegram channels, because all of a sudden, the ones that have been posting about the convoy and COVID, groups with tens of thousands of members primed to distrust experts, government, media, and institutions, shifted to posting about Russia's invasion of Ukraine, often claiming that Russia's invasion was actually justified because of reasons the government and the mainstream media won't tell you. This illustrates something that experts have said time and time again. Russia identifies the areas where we're most prone to polarization and pours gasoline on the fire that we already built ourselves. Don't just take my word for it, though. You can take it from Russia. In the documents the DOJ released in September in the US, we saw details from Russia's Good Old USA project and its guerrilla media campaign in the United States. Those documents show Russia identified existing sources of polarization to then exploit. The, quote, campaign topics they plan to focus on included stuff like what they called the, quote, threat of crime coming from people of color and immigrants, and, quote, risk of job loss for white Americans, and what they called, quote, privileges for people of color, perverts, and disabled. So that gives you a sense of the kinds of divisions Russia focused on exacerbating. It's got a lot in common with what I would call the right-wing grifter sphere and what comes out of there, where people rail against immigration, attack diversity and inclusion, pearl clutch about anti-white racism, and oppose trans rights. Like, those are the kinds of topics you hear from people like Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, and Lauren Southern. And those are the same influencers who ended up on the payroll at Tenet Media, which Russia was allegedly funding to spread its talking points. If we accept the premise that Russia never influenced their editorial decisions, as these influencers claimed after the fact, that implies these folks are so good at dividing and polarizing Western society that Russia likely saw it as a good investment to just fund them to make more of their organic content. Yikes. When we indulge in divisive, conspiratorial, and often hateful rhetoric, we are doing Russia a favor. Because a society that doesn't believe in institutions, in science, in journalism, in the validity of experts, in the value of taking care of each other, and the importance of a shared reality is a society where democracy and stability is under threat. So, a note to the politicians who use this same kind of divisive and conspiratorial rhetoric: consider what it means that Russia engages in the same tactics when it tries to undermine our democracy. Don't make it easier for them. I want to touch on one last slightly boring but super important topic. When it comes to online disinformation, I want to emphasize the importance of taking action against Google's monopoly on digital ads. See, advertisers don't know where their ads go anymore. They take their ad spend, they give it to a company like Google, who says it'll reach, say, women aged 25 to 35 who want to buy a car. But it's actually very hard for advertisers to know where their ads end up, because Google and a bunch of middlemen place those ads for them. When an industry group tried to track this last year, 3% of the international digital ad spend, which is on track to hit $1 trillion next year, went to a, quote, unknown delta. That's billions of dollars. In the course of my reporting, I've seen ads for the U.S. government mint placed on Iranian websites that are likely sanctioned. I've seen ads for the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints on a porno website. Do you think those advertisers wanted to fund those websites? And do you think, if they had the choice, they'd rather fund disinformation websites than actual journalism? But advertisers can't demand transparency on where all their ads actually go. They can't demand better from Google because it's the only game in town. Breaking up Google's monopoly and ensuring advertisers know what they're funding would be one incredibly effective way of ripping a profit motive from several disinformation websites. With that, I am happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Gilmore. I now invite Mr. Jolicoeur to make an opening statement of up to 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Je vais parler en français si...
I will be speaking in French. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify before you today. It is reassuring to see how seriously the Public Safety and National Security Committee is taking the threat that Russian disinformation and influence operations are posing to Canadians, to our democracy, and to our society. The points I'm making today are my own points and do not represent the position of my employer or any organization. My research has focused on Russia's foreign and security policy for the past 30 years. During the past 10 years, I have also been focusing on the weaponization of information by Russia and other actors who threaten Canada and other Western democracies. I look specifically at why Russia is exploiting information and how current operations fit into the larger context of Russian foreign policy since the end of the Cold War. And as part of the research, I look at the effects of Russian information exploitation on Russians' neighbors, as well as generally on democracies, to be able to see what we can do to defend democracies against information attacks and other attempts to influence and undermine our societies. I will focus on a certain number of points. First of all, what the Kremlin is doing when targeting Canada, and then why it targets Canada, and how it targets Canada, and what, if I have the time, I recommend to defend us against Russian influence attacks. There can be no doubt about the Kremlin's intentions towards the Western neighbors of Russia. They have been working 24 hours, 7 days a week in the information space. The Kremlin sees itself in a war with the West and believes that, like in a zero-sum game, the worse off the West is, the better the Kremlin is. It is important to note, though, that this is not the position of all Russians. It is the thinking of the Russian president and the Russian political elite that directly benefit from Putin's corrupt authoritarian regime. Russian interference and disinformation campaigns are not only directed at election cycles, but are pervasive and persistent. The Kremlin seeks to leverage and exaggerate societal fault lines to disrupt our political systems and societies, and they call it a Russian reflexive control, aiming at changing long-term worldviews and mindsets of citizens. The goal is to affect behavioral change in Western countries towards Putin's personal goals. All Canadian residents are targeted by Russian disinformation, not just selected politicians. Targeting of Canadians and Canadian interests happens at home, but also globally, and it is not only aimed at generating an impact in Canada. So why is Russia influencing the West? For the Kremlin, Like other authoritarian, undemocratic regimes, such as China, the sheer existence of democracies is a threat to its regime's survival. Countries like Canada show every day that repression, violence, censorship, and corruption we see in authoritarian regimes is not only unnecessary, but that it is harmful and fundamentally not in the interest of citizens. Russian citizens cannot compete with Westerners, neither in terms of living conditions, economic development, political stability, or general happiness of the people. Therefore, the way we live and how much better we thrive directly challenges and threatens authoritarian systems, as it shows citizens living under authoritarian regimes, how much better we live in democracies. Now for the conclusion. How are AI-enabled applications enhancing Russian influence capabilities? Second element, I think, can do certain things. First of all, information policy revision across the board in Canadian government. Second, adopt a sanctions framework similar to that the EU has just introduced last month, targeting individuals that support Russian influence and disinformation operations in Canada more effectively and better utilizing existing legislation. Third point, adopt a DND information operation policy, replacing that of 2018. 4, focusing more on the role of influencers in Russia influence campaigns. And 5, holding Canadian companies accountable that are helping evade current Canadian sanctions. With that, I end, and thank you for your attention.
Merci pour votre...
Thank you so much for your presentation.
Mr. Kalionemi to make an opening statement of up to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to appear before you today. So my name is Pekka Kalionemi. I'm a Finnish expert on social media and disinformation, and in recent years I have mainly focused on Russian online disinformation in a series titled Vatnik Soup. It's safe to say that during the last 10 years, Russian online influence operations have been the most effective in the world, and the Kremlin has attempted to interfere with elections and referendums around the world. The latest example is the massive social media campaign that Russia ran before the presidential elections in Romania. An unknown pro-Kremlin anti-NATO candidate gained over 20% of the total vote during the first round only by campaigning on TikTok. The whole elections were eventually annulled due to the massive Russian interference campaign exposed by Romanian intelligence agencies. In many countries, Russians hire and manipulate people to spread false narratives online, and Canada is not an exception. There are several prominent figures parroting Kremlin viewpoints regarding, for example, Ukraine and Syria. Tenet Media was already mentioned previously, but there are also several academics, journalists, and other social media personalities who spread Russia's lies online. Some of them are motivated by money, others by ideology or their ego. Some may even have become victims of Russian blackmail, compromat. And this is how Russia usually operates. They hide the origin of the message. It's also the reason why their messaging is so effective. They have this ability to make it seem organic and local. Of course, all this will be, and to some degree already is, supercharged with the use of AI. After February of 2022, Russia's main goal with their influence operations has been to stop any kind of military aid to Ukraine. Long term, they also try to destabilize Western societies, undermine trust in democratic institutions, and weaken adversaries through division and confusion. The rationale behind this is that any...
Sorry, sir,
Yes?
we're going to suspend.